Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, the founder of the Four Horsemen, the creator of the Spine Buster. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the enforcer. He's Double A. He's Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
He's also the guy that did several Our Broadways, as we went ahead, brought to light on last week's show. Nobody needs more validation than you, Conrad. You validate something, it's done. It's in the record books.
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty fired up about what we're doing here today. June of 1987 is in the rear view. Now we're picking it up from July of 87. And this is where the Great American Bash Tour gets kicked off. It's in Lakeland, Florida, the Civic Center, July 1st, 1987. There's only over 5,000 fans here on board. And this is finally the start, man, of the Great American Bash Tour. And there was a match here that was advertised that didn't take place. Buddy Roberts versus the Black Assassin. He's not on the card, but the rest of the card looks like this. The Cuban Connection beating the Mulkeys. Ron Simmons beating the Tahitian Prince. Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts, who's in for Michael Hayes, beating the Mod Squad. The Florida Tag Team Champs, Mike Graham and Steve Kern, beating the Sheepherders, who we know will go on to become the Bushwackers. And then there's a couple of matches here that are filmed for NWA Southern Pro Wrestling. Jimmy Garvin and yourself go to a 10-minute time limit draw. And this is not for Crockett TV. This is television that is going to be filmed at a Crockett show that airs in another territory. And that same treatment happens for the Rock and Roll Express. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson taking on Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. What do you remember about NWA Southern Professional Wrestling and them recording these matches here?
Would that air down in Florida?
I think so. Yeah. I would think that that's where it would air, or perhaps it was more Georgia or Tennessee. If I'm honest with you, I just know that it took place in Lakeland, Florida. And that's what's annotated here, which is sort of out of character for the time.
Yeah, you wouldn't normally say emanating from so-and-so.
Right.
It would just be like, this is our local TV show, and here's some of the talent that are performing on it, right?
Well, I think just Southern was really hand in hand with the Florida territory, but perhaps they had some syndicated. I'm not sure how far that reached, but I do know that Jim Cornette is not a part of this match. His absence has explained that he has sustained an injury prior to this altercation here. So, yeah, unfortunately, no Cornette on this one. The card would continue, though. Nikita Koloff picks up a win over Lex Luger in a no DQ match. Then we've got Blackjack Mulligan, Bugsy McGraw, Ed Gantner, and they're going to go ahead and beat Dory Funk Sr., Sir Oliver Humperdinck, and the Black Assassin, who's in here substituting for Kevin Sullivan. And then we've got the Florida heavyweight champion, Mike Rotunda, beating the Barbarian. So I guess, yeah, clearly this is the Florida show. And then our main event, or before we get there, Tully Blanchard is going to fight the UWF Western States Heritage Champion Barry Windham to a draw. And it's interesting to note that only Blanchard's title was on the line for this one. The main event, though, that I was teasing, it's Dusty and Flair. 2 out of 3 best falls, or 2 out of 3 falls. Rhodes gets the first fall in 17 minutes. The second fall is 10 minutes later. Flair picks that one up. And then finally, Rhodes wins by DQ because Tully interferes. But Tully and Rick, 2 out of 3 falls. Great main event to start a bash, is it not?
Yeah. That sounded like 10 matches. That was a big card, right?
Huge card, tons of talent. And the beat goes on, man. 15,000 fans are at the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland. This is the Jim Crockett Promotions debut here on July 2nd, 1987. It's also the debut of you guys in the venue. Gary Michael Capetta is the ring announcer. We haven't talked about old GMC before, or as Jim Cornette called him, the world's most dangerous announcer. Any good Gary Michael Capetta memories you can share?
Just a gentleman. You know, Gary?
I've never met him. We've talked a few times through social.
Perfect gentleman, always. Very professional. Nice man. Pro, beginning to end. Just one of those guys that, you know, if you didn't know he was in the room, you wouldn't even know he was in the room. He's just very quiet, very unassuming, good voice, you know, handsome guy, look good in the tux, perfect ring announcer for our business.
July 2nd, 1987, as we said, this is the second stop. And the main event is Nikita Koloff and the Road Warriors and Dusty Rhodes teaming up to take on Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Lex Luger in a steel cage match. They go 18 minutes, and then Rhodes pins Anderson. Only the first minute of the match was televised on Worldwide here. It would air on the 11th, but it actually went down on July 2nd. That's a lot of talent in a single cage and 15,000 fans on hand. Woo! A lot of action here.
Yeah, thank God we're smart enough to not give that away on TV.
Yeah.
Whew. Thank God. 15,000 people. That was one of the WWF's markets.
Yes, it is.
We were not allowed in. I'm sure how we got in there, who knows? But it was one of those that, you know, 15,000 people, that's huge.
Let's talk about the next day. I can't believe it, but the tour continues. 8,500 fans are here on July 3rd. We're in Richmond, Virginia. This time you'll be working with Nikita Koloff. He picks up a win. The rest of the card looks like this: Misty Blue over Cat LaRue, the Italian Stallion over Mark Fleming, the Barbarian over Todd Champion. In fact, Barbarians even cheered here. Then we see Eddie Gilbert, who's wearing the UWF Television Championship, pin Kendall William. Of course, he cheated. Damn it. And then we got the Freebirds, Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts defeating Ivan Koloff, Manny Fernandez, and Vladimir Petrov. Before we move on to the next match, how did the Freebirds fit in to a Jim Crockett Promotions locker room?
They fit in everywhere. Some people liked them, some didn't. You know, Michael's Michael. He was a wild man. Terry Gordy, doesn't say too much. He was the workhorse of the group, along with Buddy. And Buddy was a guy that would just go out and, you know, do his job, you know. And it was one of those unique groups of guys. All of them were different. All of them brought something different to the table. And let's just say that they would rib guys occasionally.
Yeah, I can imagine with Michael Hayes stirring the pot. I'm sure that was fun for some, not so much for others.
Yeah, it was, you know, I'm sure there were select people that he chose to rib and some that he probably chose not to.
Any memorable Michael Hayes ribs stand out that you can share on the air?
Probably none that I should.
Understood. Steve Williams is going to pin Dick Murdoch. And then we got Barry Windham working with Big Bubba. We got Ricky and Robert taking on Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Then, as we said, it's Nikita and Arn. After that, it's the Road Warriors taking on Lex Luger and Ric Flair, which is kind of fun. It's a DQ, though, because Flair's going to hit Hawk with J.J. Dillon's shoe. Imagine that. I mean, all you've seen with these guys just walking through everything. I mean, get pile driver, no big deal. Just stand right up. But, hey, you hit me in the head with a shoe, ring the damn bell. Hit a DQ here.
Hawk doesn't sell it for sure, right?
He can't. My goodness. Dusty Rhodes in the main event is going to be with Tully Blanchard in a non-title I Quit steel cage match. But ultimately, Dusty grabs J.J. Dillon's dreaded shoe and grinds it into Blanchard's face, and that's it. Tully's going to quit. JJ's shoes, man, he should have sold his shoes. I think he could sell autographed shoes to fans. I mean, this thing was a hot finish.
After hearing this story, he probably could sell those shoes today if he still got them. They had to be loafers, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah, the old penny loafer shuffle. You know, they were probably floor shines.
Oh, the dreaded loafer. Whew. Well, you know what? It didn't take much to beat us in those days. It just took a while, but it didn't take much.
Let's talk about TBS. You guys are going to have the show air here, and you're actually going to record one on 4th of July, 1987. It's in Atlanta, and it's a big-time show because later that night you're going to the Omni, and we know what's coming. It's going to be the debut of the WarGames. So we're hyping that up. We're also seeing Tony Schiavone interviewing Dusty Rhodes, who's talking about WarGames and talking about Tully Blanchard at Charlotte Memorial Stadium for the $100,000 match that we've promoted already. This same show would feature comments from Barry Switzer, who at the time was the Oklahoma football head coach, and he's talking about how excited he is. Do you think that's a Bill Watts hookup, or is that a JR hookup? Was JR hooked up with Oklahoma even back here in 87?
I think so, yeah. I don't see Bill Watts doing that. That's probably a JR deal, I would imagine.
I would think so. Still, we've got footage of Steve Williams training at the University of Oklahoma, trying to get ready for his match on July 11th in Oklahoma City against Big Bubba, which is kind of fun. And then we see a music video of the fabulous Freebirds done to that song, The Boys Are Back in Town, which is great. And then we even plug that J.J. Dillon and Lex Luger are going to be hosting the dating game on July 25th in Philadelphia. The winner gets a date with Lex Luger, which is hilarious. But let's get to the actual television taping. We see you beat David Westcott with a gourd buster. You gave him a little bit of time, 4 minutes and 25 seconds. And then next up, I can't believe this is real, but this is so great. Now keep the context. We got a WarGames later that night, and J.J. Dillon is in it. He's wrestling in it. Now, if you've just grown up watching Jim Crockett in more recent years, you have no idea that once upon a time J.J. Dillon was a wrestler. You just assume, oh, this is this Weasley manager. So now J.J. Dillon has this task in front of him. He has to wrestle like a manager, and he's going to. He's going to pin Alan Martin in 3 minutes and 58 seconds. And in JJ's corner is Ric Flair, is Arn Anderson, is Tully Blanchard, is Lex Luger, is Dark Journey. They're all here cheering on J.J. Dillon. And in just under 4 minutes, after he hit the guy with a figure four, a slingshot suplex, a gourd buster, and very briefly hitting the torture rack, JJ gets the win. This is a hilarious moment in Jim Crockett TV history, and JJ just did it masterfully because, again, to give you the context, he's been a wrestler forever, but we only know him as a manager, so now he has to wrestle like a manager. And, buddy, he did such a great job, did he not?
Yes. JJ, I always heard, Tully always told me, he said, you know, JJ took textbook bumps.
Yeah.
Perfect. Nobody took better bumps than JJ. I never got to see it, but the thing he is so famous for is the Hully Gully.
Absolutely.
Nobody can do the Hully Gully like JJ. And you're talking about entertainment. Dusty would give us those jabs and those elbows and then mow all of us down. JJ would pop up on the apron and take one in the top of the head and do the Hully Gully and the ropes. Most entertaining thing of the night.
Of course, the idea in having JJ wrestle here is this is a warm-up for what's happening later that night at the WarGames in the Omni.
Tony Schiavone here to tell you about the greatest value in the history of our great sport at freeshows.com. Get every episode of What Happened When and all of Conrad's other podcasts early, ad-free, and on video for as low as $9 a month. That's the price of a Starbucks coffee for hundreds of hours of video and audio content each month. That's not all. AdFreeShows.com is home to exclusive bonus content, like interactive events where you get to ask me anything during our Ask Tony live events. And if you're a Top Guy member, we got to hang out for the entire weekend in Chicago at Top Guy Weekend recently. Did I mention there's also happy hour every other Sunday with my dear, good, close personal friend, Rebel? If you call yourself a wrestling fan and haven't signed up for ad-free shows yet, you a lie. Sign up today at adfreeshows.com.
So let's talk about it. You got 13,500 fans here. The night opens with a Michael Hayes concert. It's also going to have a David Allen Coe concert. We've got Kendall William beating Gladiator #1, which is really Gary Royal. Then we've got Sting. That's right. Your Sting beating Thunderfoot #1, which is Joel Deaton. Jimmy Valiant is going to pin Basher of the Mod Squad. The UWF Western States Heritage Champion Barry Windham will beat Rick Steiner in a non-title match. Jimmy and Ron Garvin are going to beat Vladimir, easy for me to say, Vladimir Petrov and Conga the Barbarian. Then we've got the UWF Tag Champs, Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner, beating the world champion for the UWF, Big Bubba, and the Angel of Death in a tag match. Chris Adams will pick up a win over Black Bart. Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts are going to beat Paul Jones, Ivan Koloff, and Manny Fernandez. And then we've got Ricky and Robert, the World Tag Team Champions, beating the U.S. Tag Champs, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And of course, this is a disqualification because Tommy Young found that Bubba's hat and sunglasses were in the ring after Bubba interfered behind his back and dropped Morton with a sidewalk slam. Then it's time for Steve Williams and Dick Murdoch. They're in a Texas death match. They go 8 minutes, but now it's time for our main event. It goes 21 minutes and 20 seconds. This is the very first WarGames. It's Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, and the Road Warriors on one side with Paul Ellering rounding out their duo to take on Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, and J.J. Dillon. Ultimately, J.J. is going to submit, Hawk standing on his throat. But more importantly, there's a real injury that happens here as JJ, unfortunately, I guess draws the bad straw. He takes the Doomsday device and in the process, I think breaks his shoulder, winds up in the hospital that night. What can you tell us about your first WarGames experience?
Several mistakes were made. Number one, leaving Hawk to the end. Huge mistake. Because what he got to stand there on the outside of that cage is watch was every one of his partners, except for Paul Ellering, make these monster comebacks. And he's having to wait. And I can just see it now. He is chomping at the bit. Each guy came in, we fed them like monsters, fed them like monsters, fed them like monsters. And it just, that was our first experience of actually getting a feel for how the audience were buying it. And boy, were they. They were buying it. And so finally, Hawk comes in last, and he clotheslined all of us and knocked every one of us out. The one thing I just remember, it was hilarious at the time, is I just remember laying there cuckoo and sitting up and crawling across my feet on all fours was Tully Blanchard. Just crossed me as I sat up, and he looked right at me, and it was like a Bugs Bunny like cartoon. He went, "Fuck this shit." I don't know why I remember that. It snapped me out of it. And I think I might have started laughing. It was just hilarious. And then, of course, JJ took their, what's it called? What was that?
The Doomsday device.
Yeah, at least. And he landed right on his shoulder. And you could see it pop out as soon as he landed. And he carried that bad shoulder, that big knot, for the rest of his career. I guess he still got it. But it was that was it. 1, 2, 3. Those guys won, and it was first one was in the bag.
What's the feeling? I mean, obviously, besides checking on JJ, clearly everybody's worried about JJ, whether you're on the babyface side or the heel side. In real life, we all care about each other. That's what we're supposed to do, is take care of each other. But still, what's the takeaway from the WarGames? Did it feel special when you were doing it? Did you think when you walked through the curtain, well, shit, we got to do one of those at least a year? Or was it, how many more times can we do that? Or hell, I don't ever want to do that again. What was the thinking amongst the guys afterwards?
We got something here.
Yeah.
100% confidence after we all, woke ourselves up and figured out, what we had just pulled off. We knew we had a formula we could take around all over the country and, be honest with you, all over the world, if it would have accommodated it at the time.
Well, the beat goes on. Unbelievably, you guys are working the very next day in Greenville, July 5th. It's a matinee effort. We've got the Road Warriors on top, taking on Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. The Road Warriors were mercenaries in this era. They're not on every single card. They're in and out as they please. When you saw them, did that usually mean a bump in pay? A lot of guys talk about Hulk Hogan that way in the 80s, where, hey, if I'm on the Hogan card, because sometimes there were A and B and even sometimes C crews running. So, the biggest town got Hulk Hogan. And if you were on that card, man, it meant you were making more money. Was that true of the Road Warriors in this era?
Yeah, because you would always be on top. Very rarely where you'd be with those guys and you weren't the main event, you know. And so it just, And I think Jimmy Crockett was smart enough to know, because Tully and I went out there, we figured out a formula for them that we could do what they could do at that point safely without having those guys killing us, because we got to do this the next however many days in a row. And I think they figured out, to let us just advise them and guide them along so that everybody was able to pull this thing off, because there's not a lot of guys that can work with the Road Warriors. They were a little tentative and they were a little nervous, and those guys were very, very physical. But if they trusted you, which they did us, we were allowed to have ideas. And once they saw the ideas come to fruition, then they trusted us.
Let's jump in and talk about July 5th. We're doing 2 shows that day. We just mentioned the matinee show in Greenville that night. It's Charleston, West Virginia. This time in the main event, you're still there. So 2 shows, 2 main events. Nikita Koloff's going to team up with the Rock and Roll Express to take on Tully, Arn, and Lex Luger. It's a steel cage match. And then we're going to travel all the way across the country to the Great Western Forum on July 6th. We would see Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard hook it up in a non-title steel cage match. And I can't believe this is real, but Dusty wins with an elbow off the top onto a standing Blanchard. And after the match, here come the Horsemen. You would think by now Dusty would know better than to get in a damn cage with the Horsemen. But here comes Flair, here comes Luger, here comes Arn, and they're all attacking him in the cage. Eventually, Nikita and the Road Warriors make the save, and that turns into Nikita and the Road Warriors taking on Flair, Lex, and Arn in that same steel cage. What do you remember of this night? It has to stick out in your mind, being in the Great Western Forum where the freaking Lakers play, and here you are in the main event with the Road Warriors. This is big time stuff.
Yeah, it was not lost on me, what a big arena that was. And sometimes the arenas were the star.
Yeah.
Where you would walk in and you would see the banners and you would see, the names hanging from the ceiling and all the stuff, and go in the locker room, and, there would be guys' names, on their lockers and all that stuff. And, being sports fans, it was a big deal. And it was, the fact that we were in there, and, then you would have some of the local celebrities, especially in LA, would show up and want to come backstage, and you'd meet athletes and people from the entertainment industry. It was a little bit awe-inspiring, to say the least.
What was protocol as far as quote unquote kayfabe went back then when a celebrity came backstage? They're involved in entertainment. They probably know it's entertainment, but it's not something we're necessarily advertising here in 87. But let's say that, a celebrity or an athlete or whoever comes backstage, and yeah, they're excited to see the Road Warriors and all that jazz. But they probably also want to say, "Hey, is Ric Flair here? I'd like to meet Ric Flair." How does that go in a kayfabe era with a celebrity backstage?
You would kayfabe. You would come out. The baby faces would come out. They would do whatever was requested of them, the pictures, whatever the deal was, and they would go back in their locker room. Somebody would come get us and go, "Hey, okay, those guys are done," and we would do it separately. We would protect the business. You know, just because they're in another form of the entertainment industry, there is nothing like ours.
Yeah.
And in those days, it behooved you to protect the business.
No doubt. And you guys did it the very next day too. San Francisco at the Civic Auditorium, July 7th. Nikita's going to beat you forth from the top. After you enter the ring, or leave the ring rather, it's the Road Warriors working with Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And then Ricky and Robert are working with Flair and Lex Luger. And the main event is Dusty Rhodes with Magnum TA in his corner, taking on Tully Blanchard in a non-title steel cage match. Dusty gets the win here. And then you guys are back doing a TV taping, unbelievably, on July 8th, the next day. But you're not staying there very long, because on the 9th, we're back to Cincinnati, and you're in a main event. It's Dusty, Nikita, the Road Warriors taking on all of the Horsemen in a steel cage match. We keep that up the next day, the 10th. We're in Pittsburgh at the Civic Arena. Same thing. Dusty, Nikita, the Road Warriors taking on the Horsemen. You're all over the place, man. Let's just recap just the cities so far, where we are in July, because this is a breakneck pace. Lakeland, Florida, Landover, Maryland, Richmond, Virginia. They ran a show in the Bahamas, but you weren't on that one. Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta that night, Greenville, South Carolina, Charleston, West Virginia, Inglewood, California, San Francisco, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. We're only to the 10th. This is an unbelievable pace. I mean, at this point, are you just calling the wife when you can and sending postcards? Or, I mean, it's almost like kiss your real life goodbye for the month of July here, is it not?
Go buy some new living room furniture.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. Take the one single trip. Do you know how hard it is to get from Charleston, West Virginia to LA?
Yeah, it's not easy.
Well, you have to have private planes.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't stay over and, all that and fly. It'd just be murder. So, I mean, but it's still from there out to LA, that had to be 5.5, 6 hours, on a plane. When I hear it back and you run through these dates and the towns we're in, it was like, the only answer is we could do it because we're 26, 27 years old.
Yeah.
And again, where we're making money. And I do remember this, part in time of being with Jim Crockett Promotions. We're making some pretty strong bucks. That alleviates all your body aches and all your lack of sleep and all those negatives when you're making money and you're doing things. Because remember, go back to when I went to Charlotte, I went there with my clothes and a Toyota Corolla and $600 in my pocket, and that's it. And it hadn't been that long. Now I've bought a house. I've bought my wife a nice car. Somewhere pretty quickly after we start getting paid for these WarGames, which Jimmy did take care of us on the WarGames. The pay was really good. This is a separate story, but all of us went down to, we decided, and I'm not sure the day, month, week, what it was of that year, but we all went down to the Mercedes place, and Bobby Beck, who was a friend of ours, his dad owned the place. Bobby was a big shot, and we bought 4 Mercedes in one day.
Wow.
I bought a 300E. Tully bought 2 300Es, one for his wife, one for himself. Luger bought one, I think a 420, and we bought them all in the same day. So when you talk about flying, well, it's going to be a 6-hour flight. no problem.
Pretty crazy to think about the success that you had, but also what it required. You know, it's a lot.
We earned our money, that's for damn sure, but we made good money too.
Oklahoma City would have a show on the 11th for the UWF, and then you guys had your show at the Coliseum in Greensboro. This is 10,532 fans here. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard are going to beat Robert and Ricky by DQ. They're going to go ahead and record for Worldwide and the NWA Super Bouts, which would air later in December. Flair pinning Jimmy Garvin in a steel cage match with the figure 4. Of course, that damn dirty cheating Ric Flair is holding the ring ropes for some extra added leverage around the 14-minute mark. And the stipulations are if Flair wins, he gets a date with Precious. Midway through the bout, Ron Garvin appears to offer moral support for the challenger, but after the match, Precious climbs in the ring to tend to Jimmy, but she's grabbed by Flair, and then Ron assaults Flair until he leaves the cage. So Ron's taken up for the family here. And our main event that night is Lex Luger taking on Nikita Koloff in a steel cage match. But then afterwards, well, things start to come unraveled. Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson are going to come in the ring and celebrate with Luger and Dillon, and we're out of here. Koloff came out midway through the match here, or came into the ring rather, wearing a neck brace. And of course, you damn Horsemen, y'all are going to take it off and abuse him. Good memories here in Greensboro. And, you know, it's a little different because normally we try to let the fans leave the show happy. Lex Luger's winning here, and he is anything but a babyface.
Yeah, and in those days, you could leave with heat, especially if you're coming back the next week or 2 weeks later, or, 3 weeks later. You could get away with that. You didn't have to leave them happy every single match, every single town, every single night. There were occasions when it worked.
Next up, we've got Asheville, North Carolina on July 12th. It's a matinee show where we would see the Western States Heritage Champion Barry Windham taking on Arn Anderson. And then on the 12th, we're back in Baltimore. 13,500 fans are here. We've got Nikita and the Road Warriors beating Ric Flair, Lex Luger, and Arn Anderson. It's second from the top, and it's an elimination match. So that's kind of a fun little wrinkle. When a guy loses, he's out of here, but the match continues. Does that take any extra planning or thought whatsoever?
No, not really. It was interesting because you would normally put the babyface, screw the partners of the babyface and put him behind the 8-ball. It immediately would get your fans behind the babyface. Like he's in a mess here. The odds are not in his favor.
The main event that night was Dusty and Tully working in a non-title barbed wire match. We briefly mentioned a barbed wire ladder match earlier. This is the second time we've had a barbed wire match that we're discussing. Did you ever work a barbed wire match that you recall?
I'm sure I did, but I just don't remember. I think I probably had to have. Just one of those things that it just meant that I was going to bleed a little bit.
Oh, so you're not worried about the idea of having a barbed wire match? That feels like that would be intimidating to me as somebody who's never done it. Like, I don't know if I want to do a barbed wire match.
I've had my ass kicked every way imaginable, and having barbed wire assist in it really was the lesser of all the evils that were available. After you've been in the WarGames with that crew of guys and your head shoved through that fence a few times, barbed wire was no big deal. Very dangerous, but no big deal.
I can't find any evidence of you working a barbed wire match, so I'm going to challenge the audience. If you've got a photo or can find it on a card or a poster or somewhere where Arn did a barbed wire match, please let us know. Our DMs are open at the Arn Show. We would love to know when this happened and see what we could find out about it, and we'll talk about that on an upcoming episode.
Good call.
West Palm Beach, Florida, July 13th. We've got Ron and Jimmy Garvin taking on Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. On the 14th, I can't believe this is real, but we're in Gaffney at a fundraiser show right in the middle of all these bash shows. We're in Timken Gym, July 14th. Jimmy Valiant is going to get a win over you by DQ because you're trying to use a foreign object. I don't know what the pay was like on a fundraiser show, but I know if you're in there with Boogie Woogie Band, it's probably not going to be a tough day.
They weren't raising funds for me, obviously. I'm pretty sure I'm still waiting on the check. Gaffney is where the big butt in the peach with it's got the big hemorrhoid hanging out of it. You're familiar with that?
I am. Yeah, we got one down in South Alabama too.
Like the Gaffney peach.
Yeah, we talked about this before in Clanton, Alabama. I always thought it was original to Clanton, but you say no, Gaffney had it first.
Right on the interstate. And don't get hot. I mean, I just don't recall that you got your own hemorrhoid.
Well, yeah, I can't wait to show you my hemorrhoid in person next time.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. Moving right along.
Norfolk Scope, July 17th. Dusty, Nikita, and the Road Warriors are going to beat Flair, Luger, Blanchard, and Anderson in a steel cage match. On the 18th, man, think of this. July 18th, 1987. You want to guess how many people were here at the Memorial Stadium in Charlotte?
$20,000?
25,000.
Wow.
Isn't that unbelievable? I mean, what a crowd when you really think about it. It's got to be maybe the biggest crowd in JCP history. You know, the one on July 5th, 1986 in this same building did an estimated 23,000. And some folks said that was the largest show ever. Other folks say it's this one. And they pegged this one right at 25,000 fans, which is unbelievable. I want to mention this is a weird deal for you because it's not what we're used to. You're going to be taking on Road Warrior Animal in a taped fist match. It's not a tag match. Hawk is not in the match. Tully's not in the match. It's just you and Animal, taped fist match. But 25,000 folks are here to see it. Probably one of the biggest crowds you ever wrestled in front of.
Yeah, the biggest.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I would say something probably might have happened on Hawk's end. Don't know why he wouldn't have been there for that. Do you?
Yeah, he's wrestling Ric Flair that night.
So that's why they're split up.
It's just interesting to me that of all the things we could do, it feels like that would have been a tag match, I guess was what I'm trying to say. But we know that Tully's dance card is full. He's with Dusty. And we know Rick is going to be working with Hawk. So I guess by default, here it is. But you and Animal in a taped fist match, I don't know, just feels weird.
Well, you know what? I was glad to be with that spot on the card because that would have been a hell of a payday.
Oh, for sure.
I'd rather been that than something down underneath, even if it was a little bit wonky.
I'm not saying that everybody gets the same pay, but standing across from Road Warrior Animal, knowing he's going to get a Road Warrior payoff, not just a pop, but a Road Warrior payoff, ain't a bad spot to be in for a guy, right?
No, and I'm sure I got paid, or I would remember that, and I'd still be screaming about it. Might have been after we got paid for that week that we went and got the Mercedes. I can't remember, but I just remember that period of time making some pretty strong coin, and that sounds like it would have been the place because that would have been a nice payday.
So this is for Worldwide. Not everything here will be filmed for Worldwide, but part of it will, including Ricky and Robert beating the Mod Squad. And during the match, it's noted that War Machine is going to replace the injured J.J. Dillon for WarGames 2 in Miami, Florida. Later, though, we see Ric Flair take on Road Warrior Hawk. Flair ultimately wins by DQ, but less than a minute of the match airs before the broadcast ends. So if you used to get frustrated with Nitro and Tony Schiavone yelling, "We got to go," they were even doing it here in 87. But what we're here to talk about, though, is the main event. It's Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. Now, Dusty Rhodes has Barry Windham with him. Tully Blanchard has JJ and Dark Journey with him. There's $100,000 on the line, but no titles are on the line. But this is a barbed wire ladder match. and they go 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Dusty's going to get the win after he hit Tully with his own loaded glove, and Barry Windham is keeping JJ from interfering. Dusty's victorious, and our first ever barbed wire ladder match is in the rearview mirror. Man, what a spectacle. 25,000 fans. Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, and Dusty really needs to make another $100,000, like he wasn't making enough. Bullshit. The rich get richer. Damn it.
Well, I heard that.
You've heard that many times, I'm sure. People saying that to you, right?
I was thinking that about the Dusty $100,000 thing. The rumor was that Dusty was a giving man, a charitable man. And he said, tell you what, Tully, if Arn can beat Lou Brock in a foot race, I'll give you this $100,000 check, which is very legitimate, from Jim Crockett Promotions. And unfortunately,
it just happened that I had on pants tight that day.
Yeah, if you'd had your running shoes and not your loafers, I mean, it would have been a different ball game.
If I would have had on my Zubas,
oh, get out of here!
I'd have smoked Lou Brock.
Yeah, you just stole 2,000 bases. Everybody knows that.
Exactly.
So here we are at Roanoke, Virginia. It's a TV taping, July 19th. It's a matinee show, but we're going to get Mike Rotunda and Dory Funk Jr. go into a draw, and then Dusty, Nikita, and the Road Warriors taking on the Horsemen in a steel cage match. But right after, man, remember, this is the 19th, and that's the matinee show. We're selling out the UIC Pavilion in Chicago that night. It'll be singles action with you and Nikita. The main event is Ricky and Robert taking on Sweet Stan and Beautiful Bobby. We're in Greenville, South Carolina, with Nikita and the Road Warriors taking on the Horsemen in a steel cage match. And then come the 23rd, we're in Dallas, Texas at the Reunion Arena. It's under the UWF banner. But what's interesting is we've got a mixed card. Guys like Shane Douglas are here. He's even going to win a $10,000 pole match. So I know when people say, oh man, those pole matches were created by Vince Russo. No, they weren't. Here's one in 1987. 10 grand was on the pole. We would also see Steve Williams beat Dick Murdoch in a Texas death match. The Road Warriors would beat Lex Luger and Arn Anderson. Dusty would beat Tully Blanchard. And the main event would see Ric Flair beat Nikita Koloff. And after we were just in the Reunion Arena, where else are we running that night? A high school gym in Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's so fascinating to me that we're running these big time arenas, you know, like in Chicago or the Reunion Arena in Dallas or the Great Western Forum. But, oh yeah, we'll also run your high school gym. Wrestling's fun, is it not?
Yeah. And it could be, you know, any oddball booking like that could happen on any given night. You know, Harrisonburg, how did you throw a dart and hit that town? But yeah, I mean, it happened all the time. And sometimes, you know, those towns that did not get entertainment, you'd fill some of those gyms up before you knew it. You know, you'd have 15 grand in there. Single main event, you'd do okay. You'd do all right.
It's the Championship Wrestling from Florida show would feature Arn and Tully taking on Tommy Angel and Stevens. But we would also get some other enhancement talent in here, like Alan Martin challenging Barry Windham and Mike Jackson taking on Bobby and Stan. We're all over the place as we're doing TV. We're not just doing it in Atlanta. We're even taping down here. And I want to mention Philadelphia because they've got a big show on the 25th. And of course, all the stars are out because that is a hot territory. The main event's Nikita and Lex Luger in a steel cage match. But we've got Dusty and Ron Garvin taking on Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard in a double bull rope match, which is pretty rare for Ric Flair, especially in this era. But somewhere in the middle of the card for the prestigious Western States Heritage Championship, it's Barry Windham and Arn Anderson. I bet that just tore you up not to get your shot to be the Western States Heritage Champion.
Poor Barry, he deserved better.
I mean, it's cool that you're wearing gold around your waist, but Lord, that's like a make-believe title if I ever heard one.
Yeah, and nobody could, not one person in the audience could go, well, so-and-so used to be that. Well, maybe no, that wasn't that. But maybe, no. Where did that come from? It just appeared.
It literally did. It just appeared. Fayetteville, North Carolina gets you guys on July 27th. It's Ricky and Robert taking on Tully and Arn. Rock Hill, South Carolina on the 28th. We got Ricky and Robert taking on Arn and Tully Blanchard. And then we're going to round out the month. This is the last show of the Great American Bash Tour. 16,000 fans in the Orange Bowl. Let's run through it. We've got Scott Hall. Yes, that's Scott Hall. Razor Ramon is here in the opening match against Bob Cook. Next up is Jimmy Valiant and Bugsy McGraw taking on Ricky Santana and the Cuban Assassin. Then Manny Fernandez is going to go ahead and defeat the Mulkeys in a handicap match. We've got the prestigious UWF Western States Heritage Champion, Barry Windham, pinning Incubus with a clothesline off the top. I don't know. The NWA Florida Tag Team Champions, the Sheepherders, are going to fight Ron and Jimmy Garvin to a double DQ. Let's just stop it right there. I mentioned it earlier, but a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with the Bushwackers because Vince McMahon, boy, he really knew exactly how to cater to kids. The Bushwackers are going to become super famous in the WWF, and they're mostly a comedy act. But before they got there, boy, they were a bunch of ass kickers as the Sheepherders. And it's way until, I guess, like late 88, maybe December 88, when we see the Bushwackers debut. Having seen what the Sheepherders were, really blood and guts down and dirty brawlers, what did you think of the Bushwackers the first time you saw them?
Whoa, yay. And that's as good as it got.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I know people said that, you know, Vince put Dusty in polka dots and put him with Sapphire as a rib on him or whatever. Nobody ever talks about the transformation of the Bushwackers. And it's easy to say, oh, well, this had to be a rib on them, but they got it over. It worked. It's what they're most known for to this day. They probably made way more money from licensing and whatnot. Our great friend of the show, Cassio Kid, they were his favorite tag team as a kid. And when he told me that, I thought about not being his friend anymore, but our friendship survived. The Bushwackers, though, I mean, just a total 180 from what we've seen from the Sheepherders. It's just, it's hard to imagine. It would be like if Bruiser Brody was also Doink. Like, wait, what? That didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, he, with the power of that television, he was able to totally repackage them into something that it was like Bushwackers and the Sheepherders are two different entities. One of them never happened.
Did you prefer the Sheepherders or did you like the Licking Kids Bushwackers?
I believe I'd rather had a match with the rough and bleeding guys. We worked with the Bushwackers, and yeah. I'll just tell you, one of them got hurt and had to go home, and the other one wrestled me and Tully, me on the floor, Tully in the ring, and he beat us both.
Can you think of a bigger transformation, you know, from the way they were before and after? I guess you could go like Mean Mark Callis and The Undertaker. And certainly the Bushwackers will qualify, but is there another wrestling transformation where it's like, wait a minute, this guy became that?
Well, you just said the Whopper, which would be Mark Callis to the Undertaker.
Yeah.
That's top of the heap. You can't go anywhere from there. That's the biggest of all time, wouldn't you say?
I mean, I think so, but I think the Bushwackers have got to be somewhere in there. I'm not talking about where they moved up in the card, but I'm just saying just a total 180.
Gimmick transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it was just, you know, that whole licking people, like he would lick the kids' heads. That was the big pop of the whole thing.
Yeah.
They'd come down the ring, they'd find a kid, they'd go over and lick his head. And I often thought there were some sanitary issues there. I wonder what the parents are thinking about that. You know?
No way you could do that now, thank goodness. But
no.
Yeah, that was a wild scene to say the least.
But, you know, they're good. They were good guys. And, you know, they worked hard, and I was glad to see them make some money because I'm sure they did. I'm sure they made some money.
The rumor and innuendo is, I don't know if it's one of those fellas or both of those fellas, but certainly one. Boy, he liked those left-handed cigarettes. as the story goes. Did you
No,
hear?
no, nothing about any of that.
You never heard anything like that, of course.
No, God, come on, really?
That's just a rumor, really.
You know, I've learned over the years to not believe anything, and then occasionally some truth will pop up out of something. But if you just don't believe nothing, you're better protected.
I like it. Well, let's see how protected we are as we run through the rest of the card here. We've got the NWA Florida Heavyweight Champion, Mike Rotundo, beating Ivan Koloff with Paul Jones with an inside cradle and a fast count from referee Earl Hebner. Of course, this happens with a fast count because they had just shoved Hebner, so he's retaliating here. Next up, though, boy, talk about Florida. Here we are. Kevin Sullivan picks up a win over Dory Funk Jr. in a Texas death match. Now, we've talked a little bit about Kevin Sullivan, and most of our listeners are familiar with Kevin Sullivan, the WCW version. But just speak to for a minute how over he was as the quote-unquote devil down in Florida.
He was the devil.
Yeah.
He is the devil. That's all that's all you have to say. And his style was all over the place. He could have never been in a single match that involved countouts or DQs, because every match he was ever in was a DQ and a countout. It had to be, right?
No, I mean, blood and guts. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying he was
all over through the audience, all over the building. There could be no rules, but that was just his style.
Talk to me a little bit about Dory Funk. We haven't spent any time really talking about Dory Funk. Dory Funk, man, no other way to say it. Just from a wrestling family, a freaking legend. And it's super cool to see him on the card here. A lot of the fans who listen to this show, though, only remember a much older Dory. But you go back and you ask somebody like Bruce Pritchard, who grew up on Texas wrestling and just thinks the Funks are gods, and you can't convince him that Dory Funk Jr. is not one of the greatest champions the world ever knew. What was your experience working with Dory? What could you take from his style? Did you get to pick his brain or spend any time with him? Just talk to us a bit about Dory Funk Jr., a name we don't hear about that often these days.
Number one, he was a world-class wrestler, professional wrestler, which meant he could work a hold, he could work a body part. And one match I would challenge our audience to go find, and it's got to be plenty of places, Mike Rotundo versus Dory Funk Jr. They went a lot of nights, 30 minutes on some of these cards that I was on down in Florida. And Mike Rotundo is a wrestler's wrestler, as we know. Those guys would have a slugfest and a wrestlefest, and swapping holds and counters and all those things. That there were no dives, there were no coming off the top, none of that stuff. It was mat wrestling, slugging it out, using those lifters. I love those things. I wish I could have thrown one. Those European uppercuts, they both used them as part of their offense. And it was just for a wrestler that was my style, which was I tried to pattern myself after Ole and a lot of the guys that could just, wrestle in the ring and swap some holes and stay on a body part and wear it down, all those things, the Anderson way. You have to respect and appreciate the Funks, Dory Funk and Terry Funk, because, that's the kind of stuff they did. And they would make you believe that a guy could grab a front face lock and he couldn't get out of it for 15 minutes. And they would make you believe. And those matches between Mike and him were some of the best of that type wrestling that I've ever seen. So find it. It's out there somewhere.
You got to get excited about saving people all those dollars. They can limousine ride and jet fly now with that extra cash.
And they can style and profile with a quick 10-minute phone call right now to 425-0105.
That's 425-0105. Woo!
SaveWithConrad.com. The next match, Ricky and Robert, the world champs, are going to take on the U.S. champs, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. Unfortunately, Lane accidentally hits Eaton with Cornette's tennis racket. And then after the bout, Cornette would hit Morton with the racket before Eaton and Lane dropped Morton with the old spike pile driver. And that sets the stage for our main event, WarGames #2. That's right. The first one and the second one both happened in July of '87, both on the Bash. This one's in Miami at the Orange Bowl. There's 16,000 fans here to see Dusty, Nikita, the Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering take on Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, and the War Machine. Now, you might be wondering, who the hell's the War Machine? Well, they need somebody to wrestle in this spot because JJ's still hurt pretty bad. I don't know if we mentioned it, but the first WarGames is the last time we ever saw JJ Dillon wrestle. He never wrestled again ever in his career. That was it. And I get it. One doomsday device fall right on your shoulder, wind up in the hospital. Adios, amigos.
Excuse me, Jesus. Wow.
But that night, it winds up being Ray Traylor as the War Machine, the future big boss man, the Big Bubba, here under a hood. And I think it's even Dusty's old Midnight Rider mask. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Since you guys go 19 minutes and 38 seconds, War Machine is going to submit as Road Warrior Animal is repeatedly ramming a spiked elbow pad into War Machine's eye. Yes, Road Warrior Animal had a spiked elbow pad. Nobody talks about the second WarGames. Talk to us about this one compared to the first one. JJ's out, Ray Traylor's in.
That one doesn't stand out in my memory as like the first one did. It was different makeup. I know that I started because I started basically all of them that I was in. But Ray Traylor was, we could already see the guy was a tremendous performer. And he got around that ring for a guy his size really, really, really well. I don't remember the context of who went in what order, but I'm sure it was very physical. I do remember at Miami, it was hot and not much air blowing. That I do remember. And we were sweating like pigs, bleeding like pigs, stuck pigs. And it was just another one of those violent nights that when it was all over, you went, we got something here.
By the way, I want to mention to everybody, if you'd like to watch these matches, and maybe we'll do that for a little bonus action here on adfreeshows.com. They're both on WarGames, WCW Most Notorious Matches. You can watch both WarGames 1 and WarGames 2. And you know what? Yeah, let me call an executive decision here. We're going to go ahead and crank those out and make those happen because I think that, man, we got to celebrate WarGames here, do we not?
You're the boss. And you damn sure an executive.
Well, I don't know about that. Listen, we're having a lot of fun over at adfreeshows.com. Not only do you get these shows early and ad free, but you also get them, and this is really exciting, with tons of bonus content. Like we're talking about, we're going to make WarGames 1 and 2 as a watch along happen this month. That's right. In February, you're going to be able to jump on adfreeshows.com and enjoy both of these as a watch along with Arn. We're having a lot of fun because we also get to do interactive stuff. Arn will jump on a Zoom with all of our fans and have a real conversation. It's more than what you would get at a meet and greet. And don't get me wrong, it's great to meet Arn in an appearance. If you have an opportunity, please go see him. You're going to have a great experience. He's going to sign your stuff. You're going to get a great photo. But this is a conversation. You can see him and he can see you. It's a different thing. And we're pretty proud of it. We think it's the best value in wrestling. Hope you'll give it a shot. It's adfreeshows.com. But we're out of time today, man. This was a fun show. It flew by talking about July of '87. We'll be back next week talking about August of '87. But this has been fun today, man. Thanks for the time.
Always good. It's a pleasure working with you, young man. I appreciate your memory and being an awesome fan, just like I am.
Well, I'm a fan of all we're doing here, and I'm a fan of seeing you right here next Saturday. Tell your friends to hit the like and subscribe button. We'll see you next week right here on Arn. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.